I am all set. Yes, sir.
Mic check. You said you're hearing me. Something must be wrong. You got my attention now. Let me get off this phone. Said you don't want me no more. Honey, have your way. Can you excuse me now? I think I need to cry.
So good evening, everyone. Happy Wednesday. It is that time again here at IntellectualRadio.com and iHeartRadio Station. We are live here in Rick's room. I'm your host, Mr. Rick. Thanks so much for hanging out. We're just doing what we do on Wednesdays, having our adult conversations about some things. And I have some awesome guests here that I'm going to introduce to you here in just a moment. But listen, first off, I want to do this. Everyone with me, let's take a deep breath in and out. Spring is finally here. Spring is finally here. We can finally sigh a sigh of relief. Well, okay, somewhat. We got 70 degrees coming up tomorrow here in Chicago. I know it's going to get back down to 40, but listen, they got Elsa. All right, Elsa is apprehended, and we're ready to go. Break out the shorts, the flip flops, and barbecue grills. All of that. No, it's walking pneumonia weather, I guess. All right. Well, I'm excited about it. I'm excited to have the warm weather coming up here in Chicago. So welcome to today's episode. This is April's episode of Dear Black People. Let's talk about our kids in school. Let's have a conversation about it. I have some wonderful guests here with me. For starters, I'm going to start all the way down here at the end of the table. You all have seen her here before. This is her third time in the room. In fact, she's a professional now. She's going to host the whole show. I have Miss Natasha L. Robinson, Esquire, is in the room. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have a newcomer to the room, but has seen the show a couple of times. Joining us this evening, Mr. Keith Spruer. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I made it.
Yes,
I finally made it to Rick's room.
Yes, you are somebody.
We had a conversation going back and forth, and we finally figured out a way. Yes, we got to get Keith in here this evening to talk about what we're talking about. And I got some great discussion points, but you all know the deal. Let's get this started this way. If this is your first time, before I do this, so just so y'all know, we do have NPHC representing here. Go ahead and shout out your organizations if you'd like.
Kappa Alpha Psi.
Oh, okay.
Delta City Incorporated.
You see how the Kappa just didn't really want to tell all of his business just sadly.
At first I was like, now what is he saying? We have There's so many acronyms these days.
There really is.
I'm thinking real fast now, what is he talking about?
It really is.
You did well.
I mean, representing, but
There we
this show is Fraternity Incorporated. Blue Phi, go mob. All right, so if this is your first time hanging out, welcome to the room where we kick back, have adult conversations, confronting stereotypes, discussing current events and social actions, or whatever else may come up. Just remember, if you're participating in the conversation, be respectful. And if you're back again for another visit, welcome back. You know the deal. Go ahead and grab your adult beverage, kick back, find you a comfortable spot on the sofa, love seat, ottoman, wherever. Just stay off my bed. And we can find us here live every Wednesday night on IntellectualRadio.com and iHeartRadio Station. Shout out to the hashtag IR Hump Day crew. Hashtag Wednesday is a new Friday. We are live streaming on Facebook. Go ahead and wave there to Facebook. Say, hey, Facebook.
Hi,
Hey, Facebook.
And we're also live streaming on YouTube. Say, yo, what's up, YouTube?
Hey. We all over the place.
We're all over the
Worldwide.
place. We are worldwide. And if you happen to miss any of the shows, just go ahead and go to your app store or whatever other non-iPhone device you may use and download the iHeartRadio app and search under under Intellectual Radio Talk. And you can find all of the other Intellectual Radio hosts and their shows there. We really encourage you to participate in the conversation, folks. You know the deal. Go ahead and share your views, your opinions, and experiences by giving us a call. 708-223-8953 is the number to dial. And also, by posting the comments and questions here on the live stream. Just be sure to even share this on your page so that your friends, family, and followers can get involved in the conversation tonight as well. We're looking forward to it. Cheers to Wednesday. We got half the week is down and just half the week to go. It's okay, Keith. It's just a little sparkling tonight. Just a little sparkling. Adult beverages for
Jesus
adult
down in this cup.
conversations. Well, it is Easter, so we just got through communion and all of that. So
He rose.
He did. So this show tonight is being brought to you by Agent Eric Lane of New York Life. Y'all saw him here last week in Rick's room. Join him for a live seminar. If you're looking to learn how to build a strong financial foundation, join Agents Eric, Anthony, and Daryl Havrish, for their free seminar. Blueprint for Financial Success. Next Thursday, April 19th at 6:30 at the Center on Halsted. That's 3656 North Halsted Street in Chicago. They're exploring the base of building financial security, including managing debt, growing savings, and safeguarding against risk and unexpected events. RSVP for your spot and get your finances together. You can reach them at 617-901-9460 or shoot Eric an email at elayne, Layne, at ft.newyorklife.com to schedule a consultation and get your spot reserved. I think I would love to get over there and check it out. He just had an event for planning for college too. So doing big things. You like I said, you all saw him on the show last week. Definitely check him out. It's a great seminar to take part in. This show tonight is also being again, vacation season is upon us. Do y'all know? I just read somewhere that about over 50% of Americans did not take vacation time that was given to them last year. That's crazy to me. Vacation days that's given to you don't take. Well, listen, if you need to get your vacation and travel planned, go ahead and check out DLP Serenity Travel. They are planning trips, both domestic, international, and even cruises. DLP Serenity Travel can get you ready for your next getaway. Contact DLP Serenity Travel by visiting their website at www.dlpserenitytravel.com or give them a call directly, 773-678-4161 to schedule a consultation. That's DLP Serenity Travel, where it's all about you. So again, tonight we're talking about our kids in school. And remember, although this is an episode of Dear Black People, this is a conversation that is a community, an ethnic community that I identify with. I'm Black. We're Black. We can talk about Dear Black People. However, you don't necessarily have to be Black to participate in this conversation. Feel free to share your views, experiences, and comments from your own ethnic communities. But we're going to dive into it because we got a lot going on with our kids in school. And I figured, so this show was a suggestion back in the day when I first got started. Somebody said, you should do a show called Dear Black People, Raise Your Kids. I don't want to do just necessarily raise your kids, but we got a lot going on in high schools now, right? And it's a great opportunity to have the conversations that we need to have about what's going on in the classroom, what's going on in the schools. And the first place I wanted to start, and hey, Miss Robinson, Michael Calvin. See,
yes,
that's why we're doing
student.
that. Are we doing Miss Robinson?
Yes.
Is that what we're doing? Okay, so Miss Robinson is. And are we doing Mrs. Spruter as well?
Professor.
Oh,
Hey,
Professor. Come on, Professor. All right, that works.
Mr. Spru is my daddy. Professor.
Oh, well, all right. We'll go with that. So Professor and Miss Robinson is in the building, in the room. So to start off the conversation, guys, I came across an experience yesterday that triggered one of the cover, bullying. Right? We have bullying taking place probably at an enormous rate. I don't know if it's any different from when we were kids and we were growing up. Bullying does take place. But let me ask you, Ms. Robinson, to start off the conversation here. What are some of the ways to identify bullying, and what do you do when you notice it? Like, what's the responsibility of educators when they see it?
So my experience has been that all educators in public and private school usually have a professional development that talks about cyberbullying as well as bullying in general, and some of the indicators to look for when trying to discern if a person has been bullied or is bullying. And for some that have been bullied, usually there is kind of a secrecy and sometimes a shame because expressing that they have been bullied may lead to some type of belief that they are vulnerable or that they deserved it, or that if they share their story, then others will think less of them. So some of the indicators would be they may be withdrawn. They may not come to school as much. They may have a little bit type of emotional response to certain things. It really just varies. By me not being a psychologist, I can't tell you the psychological implications. But I can tell you from an educator standpoint, when I have seen students who are bullied, it usually has those indicators. Their performance and their grades, they go lower. They may not want to converse as much in class. They may be a little bit shyer, but it's a different type of shy. Sometimes when they don't come to school, it may be because, okay, if I continue to see the perpetrator, then that may increase the level of trauma that I may have or experience. Sometimes I have also seen those who have been bullied become the bullier, almost like a badge of protection, a armor or a shield to make sure that it does not happen to them anymore.
Wow.
So those are just some of the experiences that I have seen, and it is, unfortunately, it's an ever evolving topic because of the fact that you have bullying in person and then you have cyberbullying, which is much more of a somewhat kind of anonymous type of act of violence, in the sense that you can make any type of social media page and cyberbully someone. So you don't necessarily have to claim your own identity in the sense that if you want to do it. A lot of school officials and educators are looking more at the presence of minors online and how sometimes the fights that we see or we witness in school is because it has been precipitated by the conversation that has been online.
So, and I want to get to cyberbullying too in a bit, but Keith, talk to me about the level that you're in, because you've been in both secondary education, post-secondary education, as well as like the junior college scene. So you get the students that are just coming out of high school, right? So, what are some of the traits that you see get passed on or carried on, into that level? But you also do substitute teaching in high school, no?
Oh,
I thought you did substitute teaching in high school too.
I left that behind.
Were they stressing you out?
I have taught throughout the lifespan. So second, third grade music, high school chorus. I volunteer and work with youth, so generally high school area. So I'm still kind of in the game. And then my students, I teach a lot of developmental or the lower level classes. So my students are probably 3 to 4 months older than yours. So it's the same student.
And what are you seeing with what the traits that get carried into that level?
I think because I teach at a 2-year college, it's very different because they're not there. They don't live on campus. They don't build the types of relationships that you would see at maybe a 4-year or someplace that has housing where those types of relationships become solidified, and you see more of those bullying things, or that I would witness traits because I'd see them more often. You can very clearly recognize bully personalities, even in the classroom. The student who can never let anybody say anything without responding to it. The one who latches on to somebody early on in the semester, and you can kind of tell when that other person's like, I don't want to sit next to this person anymore. Or they come to you in your office and say, can I possibly do X, Y, and Z? Or could you tell this student to, do something? Like, seriously, they come to my office and say, Johnny was like looking at my paper a little bit and wants to study with me, but I'm not really comfortable with that. But he keeps insisting,
Well, even at that level, they're still coming to the.
You still see it where certain students play the bully role, and it's not the same, right? It's not that kind of bullying, but it's a bully personality, right?
So, Ms. Robinson, I got to remember to do that because I don't do that on a regular basis, but I love it. So it's so cool. So, Ms. Robinson, now you mentioned you were going into a direction of cyberbullying, right? In today's classroom, it's different from, again, when we grew up. There's so many changes. In fact, I was watching a show called Undercover High, and I was observing what these kids now have access to, what's at their disposal, and social media is one of them. I don't know if laptops are. Let me do this. So Ms. Robinson is giving us high school, and Mr. Brewer is Professor Brewer is giving us post-secondary experiences in the classroom. So social media, laptops, cell phones, they're all there, right? Let's start with the cyberbullying. How does that affect? How do you see that, or do you see that in the classroom? Like, are you seeing that type of bullying more so than just face-to-face bullying nowadays?
So the things that I've witnessed as it relates to the use of social media is a topic of connectivity, of being connected, where a response is immediate, an emotion is immediate, where each cell phone is now being transformed into a pulpit or a platform, if you will. And you are the CEO of your particular spot or space on the internet. So what happens is that the majority of high school students that I see, uh, they are always on cell phones, not necessarily as a form of distraction, but as a form of connection. It's also a status. Because if you have a cell phone, depending on whether you have a plan or a Wi-Fi, what type of phone you have, these are all indicators in their mind of status. So when I have a student that is engaged in cyberbullying, first, it's about connecting before you correct. That is one of my paradigms for how to deal with students. In that, while situations, and I do address the situations whether I know the student or not, it goes a lot further when I have a connection with them. So it looks like me sitting down with them, still giving them their safe space, having a conversation with them, trying to see if do they know, one, if it's cyberbullying, and two, if they do know, to let them know what the consequences are in the school as well as legally, what could happen criminally, the responsibility that they could face.
Here comes Attorney Robinson, just so you know. Be prepared.
Yes. Did you see me switch?
Right.
Wonder Woman.
Just completely did a twirl there for us.
And so it's about sometimes I get a lot further when I have a general lesson about social media and responsibility. So what happens is that if we have would-be bulliers, or bullies, I'm sorry, bulliers is not a word. Bullies.
I won't tell anybody.
It's all right. I checked myself. If we had bullies, or if we had those who would be bullied, then that way we are all on an even playing field where this is what it looks like on your social media page. When you are telling someone what you are going to do to them and at what time you're going to do it, that can be a form of bullying if that person has engaged in trying to block you, trying not to discuss anything with you, screenshotting the information and giving it over to an administrator or educator. Particularly in our law classes, we have a mock trial competition. And for our sophomores, our mock trial competition is about cyberbullying. And so what that does is that's a kind of an innocuous way of addressing a serious subject where students are realizing not only consequences at the school level, but it can also lead to civil and criminal liability. What happens when you are bullying someone? You are maybe committing the tort of intentional infliction of emotional distress. You may be engaging in defamation. These are things that we talk about in terms of the legal elements and the components, and then we match that with the emotional consequences. So then that way, everyone walks away empowered with not just what they should or should not do, but what the law says about what they should or should not do.
Again, Attorney Robinson, if y'all don't know her, get to know her. I need to take one of your classes.
I know, right?
That was a lot.
That was a legal word.
I was waiting.
Amen.
I should have brought my notepad and write down notes. But there'll be a test later. But listen, if you all have your stories to share, if you have children in school, go ahead and give us a call because we're going to move into in a bit the parents' involvement as well, moving on in this conversation. But give us a call, 708-223-8953. Go ahead. I went ahead and put that in the comments for you. Share your experiences raising children in the current academic environment and scholastic environment that's out there. Having said that, talking about social media, right? I know once we get to post-secondary education, it's a little different, but at the high school level, we have some schools are giving out laptops. But let me start first off with the cell phones, because I remember when I was in school. Well, we didn't even have cell phones out. Let me stop playing. But, moving, don't do that. Moving into the generation that we're in now, kids are getting cell phones at like 6th grade, and there is this discussion on the need for phones. But let me talk to me a little bit about how that looks, your perception, your experience with having that accessibility in the classroom. I would venture to guess, for me, that would be distracting. Like, even if I'm a teacher trying to educate students and they're on their phone, I'll demonstrate it, but my phone's over there. What is that environment like? How do you teach in that environment?
Well, again, I think it's slightly different for me. I've never taught young people who had cell phones, and even in the school districts that I was in, that the culture was very different. So even if they had them, they weren't bringing them out in the classroom.
Was this parochial schools? Yes. Shout out to the Catholic schools.
No.
I was representing for the Catholic schools. Say it. It's fine.
Well, I only taught in the public schools, but it was a different atmosphere. However, in college, you kind of say, if you want to be on that phone, that's the most expensive text you'll ever send, because I'm not repeating anything that I'm saying. The responsibility is on you whatsoever to stop you.
That's true.
If you don't want to do it, fine. Enjoy your life over there. I'm not repeating this. But I think it's both bane and blessing. So anything that you need to know is right there in your hands. And what I found which is kind of interesting, this is a generation that has never lived in a time in which there were no cell phones, right? Like you were saying, cell phones existed when I was a kid, but everybody, there was the cell phone in the bag, right?
Right. Exactly.
People didn't have access to it. Right. We were like the beeper generation.
It had to stay in the car.
Right. Yeah. Hit me on your hip.
Right.
My mother said she wasn't gonna give me one of those. Dealers and doctors.
Right.
That was
doctors,
it. If you are neither one of them, you have no business.
Right.
With that. But this generation, to have so much access to technology, has very little knowledge of how to use it constructively. So you would think, oh yeah, just Google something. Or if you don't know, you have all this information at your fingertips. There's no reason for you to not know anything these days. And students like, what? How do I find? They can't send email. All these strange things that you would expect from a student that's grown in a technological world, that you're really not tech savvy. So these things are truly large. Well, they're cameras and they text. Most of my students don't even have social media, which I find mind-boggling. And I don't know if this is kind of a socioeconomic thing. Some of my female students do. Most of my male students do not engage in social media whatsoever. So it's all very bizarre how it works in the classroom, what they use it for, what they don't even know they could be using it for to help them out.
Right.
So let's get back to let's go to the high school level. What's the preparation for going to a post-secondary education or schools, university, whatever? How do you prepare them? What are some of the obstacles and distractions that it's causing? I mean, if they're not even understanding how to send an email, but they have these devices in classroom, I presume it's got to be distracting as an educator at that level.
It depends. The use of social media, in my opinion, and of cell phones and electronic devices, it's not a weapon. It only becomes a weapon when you are not exposed to how you are to use that instrument. So if you use it constructively, then it becomes an instrument. But if you use it in a way that takes away your power or your ability to influence, then it can become a weapon, particularly if you are using it to oppress someone else. So what happens in high school is that each high school, and I would presume each elementary school, has their own cell phone policy. And the district overall may have their own cell phone policy. At my particular school, we have the policy where the cell phones are not to be used except certain designated times and places. The exception to that is if it is used in an educational way. I know my students very well. Everything that they're going to be using on their cell phone, they're going to justify. Law. And they be like, well, we got to look it up. But boo, I just passed out the sheet. So what you have to do is you have to meet them where they're at. So what do? I engage in exercises and programs and games where they are using the cell phone, but they're using it in an educational way. A lot of times, I have one of my students who shouted me out on live. She actually introduced to me a topic that we're going to be discussing in class, and she found it using her cell phone. So I always encourage that. The other thing is, as it relates to when you were talking about how when you have students that have this, for all intents and purposes, computer, at their fingertips and they don't know how to use it. That is where we come in as educators to try and model how you are supposed to use it and to still pay homage to, the First Amendment in terms of what you say and how you say it, but also being accountable and responsible by saying, if you have Google and you are looking up something, now you need to know the difference between primary sources and secondary resources. Just because it's on the internet doesn't make it true. Secondly,
what was that commercial? That was a commercial. Allstate, or was it Allstate?
I think it was Allstate.
They put on the internet does not make it true.
Yeah. And the second thing is that if you are looking up information, do not engage in plagiarism. You have to be able to cite and say where you got this information from. And then you have to kind of wrestle with it. Is it true? Is it viable? Does it support your position, or does it does it undercut your position? In terms of the use of cell phones, I also have lessons that I provide to my students to model for them and to let them know, while, you may be looking to see, if your man is spending out on somebody else.
In high school?
Yes. Oh, yes. While you were looking to see, what girl says she's going to jump bad against you and y'all going to throw fists or bust or whatever the term is. While you're doing that, potential employers are also looking at your pages. Potential colleges and universities are looking at your pages. Law enforcement is looking at your pages. And what they're doing is they're trying to discern what exactly is going on. And if you think that it is private, it is by no means private. From current news what has been going on with data breaches and how people are getting information, and how when you make digital footprints on social media and you backspace it or delete it and think that it's going to disappear, it never disappears. So it's about teaching and modeling for the students, letting them know that social media is fine. The use of electronic devices is fine, but it's all about knowing when and how to use it. You can't always be on your phone and have a job, because one is going to go away, either the cell phone or the job. So it's about teaching them how to make strong decisions so that when they do get to Professor Spruer, by that time, they have engaged in that protocol and they know what to do and they know how to use these tools.
Now, as an educator, you bring up a great point. You're modeling, right? You're setting the example. Is it possible that, it could be a situation where you send them home with homework and involve maybe their parents in understanding the importance of utilizing this equipment, this tool for educational purposes in the classroom, and getting the parents involved with that type of a role modeling situation, I guess. Is that a thing? Is that possible to do?
Well, that'd be a you thing, because FERPA
parents ain't really worried about
FERPA violations. I can't engage with my students' parents whatsoever.
But we're going to get to that too in just a second.
So I will say that whenever I have a new class starting in the year, I give out a syllabus to the students as well as to the parents. I have a signature sheet that the students are supposed to take home and bring back so that the parents know this is what you're looking for. And if any event happens where they're like, well, no one told me, I'm like, yes, I keep receipts. It's right here. Okay.
Come on, receipts.
Also,
yes.
Also, the majority of my classes are online. Google Classroom. So what happens is that when the students can't make it to school, or when they want to do a project and they want to kind of let their parents know what is going on, it could be accessible on that same cell phone, even though they may not have a laptop. They may be able to write a response paper. They may be able to do a short essay or an answer, and it's all on the use of that cell phone. So it does two things. It keeps them accessible to the work that they need to do, and then it makes them or increases rather their literacy, because there are different types of literacy. You have the type of literacy where you're looking at words and text, and then you have the type of literacy where you can be coding, the type of literacy where you are familiar with tech savvy words. And so it's just about meeting the students where they're at and taking them up so that when they graduate, they are able to function in a responsible way, and to make sure that they are still engaging, if not their parents, then their peers. Maybe if they're taking an online class And an online class is something that they need to graduate. They have now the skills necessary to go on to their cell phone, and don't think that just because it's a cell phone or a tablet, then my answers must be less in excellence. It still needs to be just as strong as if you were to write it out.
Some of my students write their papers on Google Docs on their phones, and they turn it, when I tell you, ooh, Holy Ghost. I think it is part of that. I'm on my phone, so it's almost like I'm texting. I'm not actually writing paper, so you get these acronyms.
Text, right. I've seen that.
Right, it's very bizarre.
I had to, and I'm a big fan of an advocate of proofreading. Like I so am, even on social media. Like, you really don't know how ignorant you really look if you don't take a moment to proofread while you try to tell somebody off on social media and you don't go back and proofread correctly. But so you have these different platforms that ideally are utilized for their development. So by the time they get to Professor Spruer, they understand how to, or should ideally understand how to utilize these technological platforms, ideally.
Yeah.
Right.
And even with the language that you were talking about, I'm sorry, even with the language, thank you. Even with the language that you were talking about, the writing like text, at that situation, at least for high school, that is still a teaching opportunity to be able to say, okay, this time I'm going to allow it. Now we're going to flip the switch, and you are an employer and you are sent this application or this essay, or you are a teacher and you have to grade this person. What grade would you give them and why? And so what it does is it shifts a perspective where it's not indicting them, but it's letting them know, okay, there's a time and a place to code switch. That's fine when you're talking, to Bay, but when you are talking to Professor Spruer, you have to be able to explain what that is. So it's still a form of literacy. It's just letting them know, now that you have that, let's take it up a notch. And what can we do to transition from high school to post-secondary?
And you bring up something that it just made me think. Maybe you didn't bring it up, but it made me think about this. For a lot of my students, socioeconomically, they can't afford to go out and buy computers and all the rest of this. So that their cell phones are what they have to access higher education. They're using Blackboard. They're doing their online classes on their phones. It's a point of access, which is great, right? Like,
you think
everyone can get a cell. Well, I think it is great, right? But if you really don't know what to do with it, that becomes a problem. And what you were saying about the various literacies, that's primarily what I work in. Literacy is what I do. So broad umbrella of literacy. And one of the things that I'm trying to incorporate more and more in my developmental courses is digital literacy. Like, how do you read things online? It's very different than reading something, on paper. And how do you decode things that are moving, and, you can't touch them and you can't annotate them with a highlighter, or at least, physically manipulate the text on the page. How do you deal with all that stuff? And our students aren't necessarily prepared for that world. And increasingly, the world is becoming digital.
I need to take one of your classes too, Professor Spruer. Jocelyn Stone said, yes, as long as it is used in an educational way, as Natasha said. True Business, what's going on, sir? Mr. Tone in the building. Thank you so much for tuning in. He's got a show on Tuesdays and Sundays, Truth Seekers. And then Deshaun says, when I was in school, our cell phones had to stay in our book bags, and we could only use them during lunch or last homeroom before we were dismissed from school. Deshaun, you just told your age. Leandra's checking in and said, hey, Keith. I've got a couple of other people checking in, Dana and Mom Phyllis. Thank you so much for joining us. So now I'm curious about something that's important to me that I want to put on the table, and maybe not so much for you, Professor Spruer, but for you, Ms. Robinson, Esquire. So parental involvement, what is it looking like? What do you what allowances do you have to hold parents accountable for their students, for their behavior in class, for the usage of cell phone that becomes distracting versus an educational tool? How is that looking for you, and how do you navigate that?
I will say it's been my experience that the landscape of parenting has changed. How do we define parenting? Because the traditional paradigm where it was a mother and a father, your biological mother and father, has completely changed in the sense that you still have that. But now, in addition to that, you have maybe grandparents who are parents. You have siblings who are parents. You may have young people who their state is their parent because they are either abused or neglected, or they have been adjudicated delinquent. So when you're talking about parental involvement, is first trying to understand the audience in which you're in, understanding what are the what are the statistics or the data in the neighborhood that you're in. So for me, I teach on the west side.
Come on, West Side. Yeah.
You couldn't help yourself.
I couldn't. I had to. Thanks. Appreciate it.
So once we determine who our base is in terms of students, you have to be proactive with that. Uh, when I was coming up, if you got a call from the school, you done something.
Right. Exactly.
And so now, at least for our particular school, we have the protocol of calling home once a month to all of the students in our homeroom.
Really?
Regardless of their behavior, regardless of their grades. It's just kind of like a check-in. And we're being proactive to let the parents know this is what's happening in the life of your child. And so the more times you do that, the more ties and connections that you're making with parents. As it relates to cell phones, it has been my experience, just me, myself personally, the three of us have observed that when a child is in a room and they're on their phone, a lot of times it's the parent that is texting them or calling them.
Wait a minute. Wait, hold on. Wait. So you got parents interrupting their children's class time.
Well,
and I presume it's for emergency. I'd like to believe.
It can be. It's a spectrum. Because most parents, if you ask them, they will say, well, if it's an emergency, what I may need at the time, I don't have time to go through the switchboard and push 2 for English or 3 for Spanish and push 7 for, the main office. I can touch my baby right there. She on the phone anyway. So let me just ask her, can you watch your brother, or can you pick this up, or there's an emergency. It is a spectrum. I've been teaching in classes and have had several students on several occasions learn that a loved one had died in a text because their parents texted it to them, because that was the quickest way to communicate.
Yeah, but why would you want to text your child in the middle class, so-and-so died, and distract them from, their learning environment?
When they're in their mind, and I can't speak for them, but I'm presuming that they don't think it's a matter of, I would like my baby to hear about this first from me. And let's be clear, we live in an age now where a lot of times we learn about people dying on the internet.
Yeah.
And so what more painful moment can you have than you just scrolling through your timeline and you realize that someone has made their transition? So getting back to the use of cell phones and electronic devices, again, we just share with the parents what our policy is. We would ask them that they would honor that in the situations where it is distracting. We have a protocol first of telling the student put their phone away. The second time, taking the phone from their student and holding it maybe till either the end of the period, end of the day. The third time and anytime thereafter, now we got to have a conversation with our dean, with the teacher, with the parent, with the student. And for students that I teach, their phones are their babies. If they could claim it on their taxes, they would. So they don't want their children to be taken away from them. So they will do whatever is necessary to make sure, okay, I'm sorry, Ms. Robinson. And a lot of times, again, coming back to connection before correction, a lot of times I don't even have to say, Keith, put your phone away. I'm walking past, Keith, and it's my tone, my elevation, or my calmness. They know that there's something that they're not supposed to be doing. Okay. And so there are times, kids are going to be kids. And so it's not necessarily about telling the parents we prohibit the use of cell phones. It's about saying that there are just some rules and some regulations that we have for your child's benefit as well as for your benefit. And every child, public school, private school, parochial school, they are entitled to have full 50-minute, 60-minute classes, and nothing or no one should be a distraction to them. Because the time that you use on your cell phone, I tell my students all the time, please put your cell phone away. And if they keep it out, I said, I'm going to screenshot your grade and then I'm going to text it to you and your mama. They be like, hey, Miss Robinson, why you flogging? Things like that. And so what happens is it's not really as big a deal, at least for me. Now, I know for a lot of educators, it's a big deal. And so it is just about trying to figure out what can you do where you can turn that distraction into an instructional moment.
So online here, we got a couple of people that are commenting. Kent Carr said he's guilty. He's done it. And again, I can totally understand, Kent. When you have children, you do live in an age where information is immediately sent to children. I kind of correlate when we grew up. Like, we had to deal with learning how to get that information when we got home, or at a later time, unless it was urgent where your parent had to come pick you up out of school, then, they would call the front desk or the main office. But ultimately, like I said, it's a different world. Deshaun says, I've been a tutor in math and science 20 years. When I tutor students, parents have a form they have to sign, and I do Q&A after my sessions with their children. Mm-hmm. As we continue on, before we continue on, I want to let you all know this show is also being brought to you in part by A. Shakur Boutique. A. Shakur Boutique is offering 20% off of your total purchases by joining the mailing list. Go ahead and check out the latest spring fashion options offers at www.shopashakurboutique.com. That's ASHAKUR, shopashakurboutique.com. I'm waiting for it to get some men apparel so that I can start sporting it here on the show. Check it out, Afina. Help me out. Also, 'tis the season for proms, graduations, and weddings, all of that wonderfulness. So Brand L is offering professional MUA services and consulting. Go ahead and contact Brandy to book your appointment today or consultation at 872-216-9454. That's BL, be feminine, improve the space. So we're talking about parents and their involvement with their children in school. I want to kind of shift a little bit over to the amount of support that you get when it comes to teaching and educating students, whether it be the administration, the school district, the deans. When you have a student in class, I feel like it is the educator's responsibility to ensure that the student is learning, basically, bottom line, right? But there should be some support. So we talked about parents' involvement. What does it look like, the support from administration, from the institution itself, to ensure that you are set up for success, that you're safe, all those wonderful things? Professor Spruer.
Well, can I actually back up? And I
do
want
sure,
to address
yes,
the
go
issue
ahead.
of parental support.
Please.
So, number one, I should not be dealing with students' parents.
Oh no, no!
I should not. Right?
Are you dealing with students' parents?
It's an interesting kind of play because legally I cannot give out any information concerning a student's attendance, their progress, anything relating to them in that classroom. I can't get that out to anybody unless they give me permission to do so. And even at that point, with some proxy for you. Mm. You should be an adult at this point. If you have concerns about your progress and all the rest of that, I should be dealing with you. And I think that some of that comes with parents having to somehow negotiate being there and being supportive for their students and helping them and kind of guiding them, but also helping them to become independent. And what are the kinds of questions and things you should be asking? And how do you hold people accountable for things? And you have to go into this space by yourself. You can't have me come in and speak for you while you sit in the corner. So I think oftentimes when I see students who are railroaded in education, and I've seen it where I'm like, this should not have happened. I didn't like what an administrator did or what some other teacher did. It often comes back to the student didn't know how to advocate for themselves. And you wonder, where does that start, where you don't feel that you have agency to go into a space and advocate for yourself? And I wonder how that happens. On the other end, you've got parents who will storm into your office.
At that level.
At this level, yes.
Hold on now.
And particularly for students that have possibly had IEPs, and they're there to support them. But again, your child is now an adult. I can't talk to you unless your child gives me permission. This is an interesting little story, and I'll make it really quick. I had this student who came into my classroom. She said her name, Nigerian woman, lovely woman. She gives her and said, "Oh, I've had a student with that name before, except it was a male." And she said, I know he is my son. I said,
you did that really well too, that accent.
oh, wait, the story gets better. I said, oh, okay. She said, yes, I have signed up for this class to see if it is as hard as he said it was or if he is lazy.
Wow.
She audited the class?
Right.
Okay.
She signed
She
signed up for credit. She said, I'm going to take this class to see if my son is lazy or if it's as hard as he says it is. Like,
is that what we doing these days?
Okay.
But I was like, well, I can kind of roll with that.
Yeah.
I can kind of roll with that. But there is some space for this kind of development to happen earlier in life. It shouldn't start where you get to college and now you have to learn how to become this independent person. But there have to be little bits of this happening along the way. So
I would say my experience as it relates to administration is if you start from the head, then usually the rest will follow, usually. So what does that look like in real life? It looks like involving parents in the process early on. It looks like telling them what the process is, not trying to hide it, not trying to make it inaccessible, to explain what the process is, and then to be consistent with that process. Now, of course, things happen, on a case-by-case basis, but a lot of times as it relates to school policy, parents appreciate the rules more when they know that it is consistently applied across the board. Now, that can't always happen, but optimally, you want to be able to say, okay, in this situation, it is the same for this student, and for this student.
Real quick, I need to interrupt because we have some people that are saying hello, and I hey all y'all that are joining in almost at the last minute. I appreciate it, but specifically Mr. Jared Johnson, Jay, this is not the way that you spell Ricky. I just want to let y'all know, and he's the only person. He can only get away with calling me Ricky because he knew people that call me Ricky. If you call me Ricky, you knew me pre-18, and that's how that works. That's how it works. If you met me after I was 18, you were not allowed to call me Ricky, and it's with a Y. But I appreciate it, Jay. What's going on? Thanks for tuning in. Parental involvement is important, and I really want to shout out all the parents who are involved, who are staying involved with their children's development, and whatnot. What about behavior in class? How do you coach and develop behavior in class as it relates to the environments that they're growing up in?
I kind of love what Tasha says about you have to meet people where they are. I can't remember which educator this was. I was reading something, and Jocelyn, I know Jocelyn's her first name, and she said something along the lines of parents send their children to school in the best condition that they can. That you've done the best that you could do with what you've got, and sometimes there's certain types of traumas that students experience in home, and it shows up in the classroom, and it's not my business. Or at least on my end, you all are mandated reporters of certain types of behaviors, but I can't really ask questions about what happens outside of my room. There are all sorts of other violations that kind of brings up. But when I see these types of behaviors, a lot of them are just juvenile behaviors that you didn't learn how to deal with in high school, and you've shown up to grade 13, and you think that these behaviors are still going to work for you. And I kind of like where I teach and what I do, because I feel like I can be that transition that you can try to act a fool a little bit. And I might give you a little bit so that we can correct this real quick. I'm not going to fail you for this, but guess what? You're going to go to the next class and this teacher's not going to care about you. And when you do X, Y, and Z in that classroom, you stand up, you overpower the room, you get loud, they're going to kick you out. They may even send you to the disciplinary process, and you can be expelled from the institution.
And rightfully so.
And well, I don't know if that's always rightfully so.
Okay.
Yeah.
No. On a couple of occasions, I felt like it has not been rightfully so.
Gotcha.
And that there are issues of socioeconomics and race and gender and things that play out with a lot of our children, behaviors that they haven't taken care of earlier on.
Gotcha.
That carry over, and you don't get a do-over, right? Like this could ruin your career, your financial aid, all these other issues that kind of surround something that was so simple, right? Like that a little bit of coaching here or there could have solved, but it escalates once you get into my world.
Yeah. In high school, we have discussions about culture and climate all the time, because we know, and there's been a lot of data to show that you will be more successful and more excellent in a place where you feel comfortable and where you feel safe. When we have situations dealing with behavior, we, of course, can call the parent, let them know. We also have a device called a grade book where you could put in the grades electronically. The parents can look at that those grades as well as the behavior to let you know what the behavior is. You raised a point about trauma, and I think about the students that we teach every day. And the only way I can explain it the way I feel it is when I gave birth to my daughter Grace. Uh,
Shout out to Grace if she's
yes.
watching it.
Oh, she's
13,
watching.
13 months old.
Hey,
14,
13 months, my
13
bad,
months,
yum,
yeah.
yum. When I had Grace, I had an epidural. Now, when you give childbirth, you can go completely natural. You can have an epidural. The purpose of epidural is, of course, to numb the pain. Now, it's still painful, but it's not as painful. So while you are being numbed by the pain, you are being encouraged to push so that the baby can come out. And so my thing was, how can I continue to be productive in giving birth if I'm numb at the same time? And so when we talk about students in school, we have students, particularly in high school now, that are numbed by pain. They are numbed by different types of trauma, by their parents, by the lack of parents, by the pressure of trying to do well, by poverty, by racism. Just you think about it, you name it, that's what they're experiencing. Where when I was in high school, a death of a colleague or a classmate was very, very rare. Now it is becoming an everyday occurrence for our young people. So when they are experiencing that pain, some of them become desensitized and become numb to it. So you have them being numb, but we as educators are telling them to push, to produce, to do something without recognizing that they are desensitized in the first place. So where it relates to behavior, understand what are the root causes for why students are doing what they're doing. Trying to establish again those relationships. You have students who are fighting criminal cases. You have students who are homeless. You have students who have their parents who are incarcerated. You just have a complete spectrum. And so it's about establishing that relationship, following the protocol, and then checking to make sure that they are supported in academic and behavioral ways.
Awesome. Well, listen, I don't mean to cut you guys off, but unfortunately, that's our time for the evening, and we appreciate you stopping by. Thanks so much to my guests, Natasha, Ms. Robinson, Esquire, and Professor Keith Spruer for stopping by tonight. Be sure to download the iHeartRadio app or find us on iTunes under the podcast section. Just search for Intellectual Radio and find all the shows in Intellectual Radio family. And continue to share this page and keep the conversation, share this conversation on your page and keep it going amongst your Facebook friends, family, and followers. Next week, I'm going to be on site over at West Point Missionary Baptist Church. We're going to be talking to the Dr. Pastor El Bernard Jakes about faith, family, and moving the community forward, not just a pastor. So tune in for that as well. I believe we got Dana on her show being on site, so you can check her out also at IntellectualRadio.com. It's been a great time hanging out there. Special thanks to Al Young for sponsoring Rick's Room and producing, Al Young Enterprises provides resources for performance and production engagement, artistic development, personal imaging, image consulting, and now your dining needs with Eat by IMAY Roman numeral 3. Just contact him, 773-220-9869. That's Al Young Enterprises. Whatever you do, do it with passion. Thank you so much. It's time. Get home safely. Get out my room.
And I'm praising my God 'cause I'm proud.